Next up, our third session for today is a really exciting podcast launch as well, coming to us from South Africa, from the team at Radio Workshop. Radio Workshop is a project of the nonprofit Children's Radio Foundation, and they are audio lovers at Radio Workshop. So they're also very experimental. So they've now branched out into podcasting and are going to be launching the new podcast, which focuses on LGBTQI plus issues and on the LGBTQI plus community. They also do have a workshop, Africa Podcast Workshop, which is a very exciting opportunity. It is Africa's first podcast incubator that is regional. It's open to you, the African podcaster. It's free and it's virtual. So head on over to Radio Workshop, check out their website, Google Radio Workshop. But first, listen to them, take a look at their podcast launch coming up next. Their podcast is called This is Africa.
Hello?
Are we on?
Yeah, I think we are.
Yeah, I think we are. Hello, everyone.
Hi, everybody.
Good morning, everyone. We're really excited to be here. Thank you so much to the Africa Podfest for having us. Just to start off, maybe we could do some intro about who we are and where we come from. We're going to start off the video and then maybe just switch to some slides so we'll have some audio. But just to give you a little bit of information about who the Radio Workshop is. So we are a podcasting company that develops high quality audio content. And along with our production, we also have a training leg. But at the center of our work is, we really want to collaborate with creatives from across the continent because, of course, like everyone here, we're really interested in the growth of the podcasting industry on the continent. I didn't actually tell you my name. So my name is Lesedi Mogoatlhe, and I actually work as a host for our This is Africa podcast, which is under the Radio Workshop. And I'm also working as an editor in training. And maybe just a little bit of background about me and where I come from. I actually have my background in the film and TV industry. I worked as a documentary director for about 15 years. So always been quite steeped in the world of storytelling. And I sort of made my way into sound when I started working for the Children's Radio Foundation in 2007, where I worked as a host for a youth show that they produced for a national broadcaster. And I was then completely in the waters with them, and I went on for several years as a trainer, training young people to produce radio across the continent. So and then I'm back again at CRF, through this Radio Workshop initiative, back doing sound again. And it would be really lonely for me to have done this alone. So I'm so glad that my colleagues agreed to tag along with me. I'll get them to introduce themselves. Dhashen, Andile, how are you this morning?
Hello, Lesedi. Hello, everyone listening. So yeah, I'm in Johannesburg. It's a lovely day. It's beautiful outside. It's sunny. So of course my sinuses are flaring up. But other than that, it's a wonderful day. It's so great to be with you. So yeah, I'm Dhashen. I work with Lesedi and Andile, and essentially what I do is find stories and pitch them. Hopefully, my editor accepts them. That would be Lesedi. And Andile helps me craft those stories so that we can produce something that we're proud of. I am a producer here at Radio Workshop. Let me hand you over to Andile.
Hi, guys. Thank you, Lesedi, for dragging me off my bed today to do this with you. I'm Msomi. I'm a podcast producer and trainer for This Is Africa, so I work closely with the team here. And like Lesedi, I'm also affiliated with the Children's Radio Foundation. I learned about the program through a sport program back in 2020 when I played basketball. And I was really intrigued by the medium that they used, which is radio, for social change, to give young people to tell personal stories. So I then joined the program back in 2020, helping these young reporters across the country acquire storytelling skills and tools for radio. And part of my work also includes producing, scripting, and editing 5 minute radio workshops, which are pretty much personal stories and opinion pieces on a variety of issues, which are aired on SAFM weekly, which is a national talk radio station. So that's me. Back to you, Lesedi.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Okay, so we just wanted to come on video so that you can put some faces to the names. But we're going to go to our studio and sort of like do everything by audio, because that's what we all do. So we'll be back at the end for a Q&A. Please, anything you hear, please leave your comments, have questions, and we will get to that at the end of the session. But for now, I will slide go. Okay, so yeah, I told you a little bit about the radio workshop and what it is that we do. And, you know, just to talk a little bit, you know, you'll hear us mention throughout the Children's Radio Foundation. So maybe give you some background about how CRF, or Children's Radio Foundation, relates to the Radio Workshop. So the Radio Workshop is an initiative of CRF, and CRF is basically an organization that trains young people to be radio reporters, and it does this in partnership with 72 community radio stations across 6 countries in Africa. And what we found, you know, having trained for so many years, is that, you know, like we all know, radio works in terms of offering an opportunity for anonymity, you know, where young people can talk freely about social issues or other things that matter to them. But, you know, when we wanted to work with LGBT youth from across the continent, even radio wasn't a safe enough space, you know, because in so many countries around the continent, you know, being LGBT plus is criminalized, you know. So we thought, how can we create a safer space for young people to still, LGBT youth, to still continue to share their stories? And that's how we thought of venturing into podcasting. And, you know, we started a podcast training project for LGBT youth, and after some research, kind of rolled that project out in Zambia, Zimbabwe, in DRC, and in South Africa. And, you know, we really want to talk about the LGBT plus podcast project, because we believe that's where we learned so much about the African podcast landscape. And that's really what informed how we came to develop all the other projects that we did around podcasting. I'm just going to invite Andile at this point, because you know, I started this, well, we basically started the LGBT project together. We were in the thick of it, trying to develop a curriculum, trying to figure out how it would work. So Andile, maybe you can just share, what stood out for you, some of the personal stories or moments that moved you on this project, and what you think really worked when we did this project, informing particularly where we are now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lesedi. Firstly, I'm going to speak about the two things that stood out for me, that moved me about this project. I think the first one was how diverse and human the stories shared during the training and throughout the program. I think the society
I know, I think we've lost Andile's line. Lesedi?
that is unique from a human.
Okay, it seems Andile's line is coming in and out.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're so sorry about this, guys. Obviously, this is one of the challenges being remote, and of course, being remote and trying to do a presentation is pretty hard. So we're really sorry about that. Let's see if Andile is back. If not, Lesedi, maybe we can just take over this part of the presentation.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, I mean, I really wish I knew the story Andile was going to share, because it is her personal story after all. But I think she's back. She's back now.
Andile, are you back with us?
This is when we needed DJ Dhashen, just to have like some tracks in between, you know?
That's so true. So if our technical person is listening, Tevin, Andile is backstage and just waiting to be let in. I'm wondering if you can help us out here.
I mean, Andile did want to share an audio piece that she had selected from the LGBT podcast project that maybe we could play in the meantime while we figure out the technical stuff, and then she can speak to that and then just like pick up from where she left off.
Perfect. Yeah.
Looks like I'm back in.
Oh, great. Welcome back.
Sorry about that, everyone. I'm not really sure what happened. I think you said you lost me from the beginning.
Yes, we didn't really hear what you were sharing about the personal story, so maybe you can start from there again.
Yes, I'll go through it very quickly for time purposes. I think I really just want to speak about the two things that moved me when I participated in the project initially. The first one was how I found the stories to be diverse and humane, that were shared during the training and throughout the project. I think the society has a tendency to ask the queer community to tell a queer story that is unique to the human experience, which can be alienating and also perpetuates the stigma about the queer community being other, as opposed to human beings who just want to be treated like everyone else. And this expectation to perform can be asked more, especially of the advocacy groups. So the participants brought their full selves into the space, and we worked and collaborated with holistic individuals with varied experiences. For example, one participant told a story about how he had ambitions to thrive in a big city and was disappointed when he didn't quite make it and had to move back home, a small, sad, and remote town where nothing much really happens. And this story is quite common. And the second one was about the pleasures and complexities that comes with being a trans woman, sangoma / I guess a traditional healer in a small town. And another thing that moved me the most about the groups was how quickly they understood and learned the storytelling formats during the training, and how they internalized them and selected the best formats, the ones that are best suited to bring, the human stories that I'm talking about, that they want to that what they want to bring into life. So I'm just going to quickly play an audio that sums up these 2 points.
Joburg is known to be a place of dreams and hopes where everyone goes to live out their best lives and dreams. For me, it had become a place of stagnance and I had to leave. This had been in my mind for a while and had done my research on all what could be possible if I were to be in Pietermaritzburg. A lot of questions were rising up during my thinking, and I remember that's when I froze up. Nothing was in my mind except moving. I stopped going out to clubs and partying because that lifestyle was not serving me. I withdrew from a lot of people, and everyone was asking where was that flamboyant Ulelani. I paid no attention to all of that, but finding my way out of Joburg. I discovered during this time that I didn't like soapies. Every time I would hear the Generations intro, I knew it was cue for me to go wind my mind. I lived in the most quietest streets of Orlando West, and half of the time, the only commotion I would hear was the sound of the train passing by from the train station that was 5 houses down from mine. I will swiftly leave the house and walk to the other end of the street, to a beautiful park with trees and benches. I will sit there with my Blackberry headset and cigarette, and I will gaze upon nothing, just thinking of what could be in a new city. When I finally decided to pack my bags and head to Pietermaritzburg, where I knew no one and was only familiar with the place because it was my hometown, was very dramatic. My adoptive mom had invited her extended family for the weekend because she was doing umsebenzi wamadlozi. I had bought my ticket on that Thursday and planned to tell her, but couldn't because she was so excited to see her family. I kept quiet and I didn't tell her until Sunday morning when I had to leave. I had packed almost everything I could and my bag was waiting for me. I woke up, took a shower, made her breakfast, and took the opportunity to sit down with her and tell her. It came in as a shock because she hadn't suspected anything, but because she was understanding, she wished me well and told me to take care of myself. I remember how that morning set the tone to who I would be or become in the new environment because her blessings was everything to me. I took my big bag and rolled it out of the house and yard towards the train station for taxis to town. I got to Park Station and got on the bus to KZN. I sat there next to someone I didn't know and even forgot there was someone next to me because all I did was to sit and take a long, deep breath because for the first time in a long time, I felt I was doing something for me and had taken a good life changing decision.
So what
Great.
it was very encouraging to see and hear how radio skills are indeed easy to learn, and how the groups really brought themselves and experiences as activists, some of them as writers and theater performers into the project. I think the second point I wanted to highlight, Lesedi, was what really worked. In the project, what really worked about the project was how we as Children's Radio Foundation, we took an already existing training tools for our radio programming and packaged it to fit the podcast context. And I think the participants across the continent quickly grasped the storytelling format and just ran with it, and created and still continue to create very rich and personal stories, and producing podcast episodes to share their experiences that can be podcasts that can be streamed on most platforms. So it was very important for us to also accumulate audio content that best represents the African context and share it across our sites and networks. And this content is repurposed for training to speak to local issues. And during the training, participants, during the trainings that we did while the project was on, participants learned through listening to sample podcasts like the Afro.Our, the Kenyan podcast. And because podcasting is quite new in the continent, we also had to tap into the podcasts that are from outside the continent. And which brings me to my last point about how the Queer Radio Project was new, and podcasting also a new turf for us and kind of a new thing for the continent as well. So learning through listening to podcasts meant tapping into podcasts outside the continent for training samples. I'm just going to hand over back to Lesedi to elaborate on the things that didn't work about the project. Thanks, Lesedi.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, you've really spoken to a lot of what we experienced and what we learned from Andile. I mean, of course, the big thing that we struggled with that you mentioned was at that time when we started with the training around 2018, 2019, it was so difficult for us to find podcast examples to play within our trainings, especially that related to queer issues. So that's why Afro.Our was just so important to learn from. They have all these great formats that they use within their podcast, which really helped us translate what we were trying to teach people. And, another thing that maybe was also a bit challenging was, like podcasts, listening to podcasts is a culture in a way. You have to instill that. People are used to listening to radio. Radio is still the boss. So just to get people to actually, use their own data, go on the internet to access podcasts was quite a thing to do. And we'd find that the people we trained would only listen to podcasts when the training actually happened, until they started to produce their own podcasts, of course. And it became sort of like part of the culture. And we're really, really proud of what these groups managed to produce. So many of their podcasts are still going, like the Zim Purple Royale podcast is on Anchor FM and is really, really phenomenal. And many of the participants are still recording via their cell phones, mobile phones, and then putting everything together, but working remotely and doing a really great job. And then, because we're nerds, we have some tips for you. So some tips, and I guess these are just really about our learnings when it came to training and podcasting. So focus first on storytelling techniques before honing in on technical elements. Like Andile said, we had to put the storytelling first, because there was something about getting people who had never done this before to really build their confidence, and really feel that they could be storytellers and mine out all of that personal. We used a lot of exercises, methods from theater, which really, really worked well. And then also, of course, when you're asking people to share all of these personal stories, you have to keep in mind that when people tell their stories, especially difficult stories, which we obviously came across in the LGBT community, there needs to be some form of support to help people process traumas. So many of what came up was triggering, and so we made sure that in each training we would have somebody who would sort of be there to hold the space and offer more kind of advanced support that was like psychosocial support for the participants. And of course, as much as we say storytelling techniques before technical elements, the technical still counts. The technical still counts. Good quality audio does make all the difference. It really, really does. And once we had sort of gone through the first few phases of training, we really tried to focus on the technical, even though there were limitations. And then, of course, we were doing this training, this LGBT training, but we had actually never, as a company, produced our own podcast. So we thought, okay, this is not fair. We need to actually get our hands dirty, and we need to figure out what are the ins and outs of producing a really, really high quality podcast. And that is how we came to create the This is Africa podcast, which is the Radio Workshop's first podcast. And This is Africa really is a podcast that tells stories about people who live on this continent. And it's really about the extraordinary and ordinary moments that occur in their everyday lives. Each episode is really driven by a theme, which we explore through a combination of reported stories and host interviews. And what we make sure to do is come with some really deep questions, to the themes that we select, and just a whole lot of curiosity, so that we can get really compelling stories and just hear this amazing sharing that really speaks to maybe not like addressing problems and solutions in Africa, but really talking to quality stories that really, speak about the humanity of Africans, something that we resonate with, that's really kind of outside of what we usually hear on the Western platforms about our continent. So we had big vision, we still do, for This is Africa, and part of realizing that vision required bringing in experts. I'm sure a lot of other podcasters out there will know that you can't do this alone, how important it is to have community and to share, ideas and expertise. And the first person we brought on was Amy Costello. So Amy Costello has come on board and joined the team as an editor, but also a mentor. You're really training us, or training me also in my position, around all things editorial, and making sure that we develop the tools and all the processes, is that a word, processes, that we need for the first season. And she has her own podcast called Tiny Sparks, and there she works with a producer called Freddie Boswell. And then she, recommended that Freddie come on board. So Freddie has joined us as the senior producer and also a mentor, training our producers, and they really holding our hands through the first season. And what we envision is that in the second season, the African team will be able to then take over with the production of This is Africa. So it's a small team, me, Andile, Dhashen, Freddie, and Amy, and then we've got Martha and Mike as well, who are doing the things. They are amazing. We can't do without anyone in this team. It's really a great team. But maybe Dhashen, this would be actually a cool time for you to share some stories about the journey getting to actually producing a pilot, because I know you were one of the producers who was like in the mud. You had to pitch and repitch, go to the drawing board. You recorded some stories, had to figure out how to get good tape and then chuck things out. But basically, you really understand the rigmarole around the refine philosophy that we've been kind of following. Maybe you can share some highlights from your experience.
Yeah, I'd love to, Lesedi. So yeah, I mean, this is really I think one of the most important things that we've learned is that these are things that you may know, but you have to practice this. So everything I'm going to tell you is going to sound really obvious. You know this already, but that's not the problem. The problem is that you need to practice it to get better at it. And well, frankly, that's going to take time, right? So in the beginning, we all make mistakes. We all pitched a bad story. We recorded bad interviews, as Lesedi said. But as we practiced and began refining, we started figuring out what we wanted to do. So our first tip to you is pitch a story. Don't pitch a topic. Now, that may seem obvious again. The key here is to refine. The best way to walk you through what refining is probably to play you something. So where do you normally find your stories? Many of us start the process by doing a bit of research. Maybe you scroll through Twitter. Some of you may still watch the news, perhaps. And that's what I did.
Start with news just in. The first case of coronavirus in South Africa has been confirmed. A 38-year-old man has been tested.
The message is clear. There will be no jogging, no walking of dogs, and no sale of alcohol during the national lockdown.
Restrictions placed on restaurants and watering holes are proving to be a massive headache for authorities here in South Africa. This as they grapple with ways to slow the spread of COVID-19.
So this was last year when the pandemic had just started in South Africa. No dog walking allowed. That was probably the worst thing for me. Others may have had problems with the fact that there wasn't any alcohol, whatever. I'm tempted to think that many of us listened to that and thought, oh, great, the story there is South Africa's really severe lockdown measures. And that was my thinking too. I thought, well, great, that's the story. But that isn't the story. You need to keep refining. And what we found out was the next stage was, I want to do a story about the social pressures that people are facing during lockdown. That was our first revision. And in order to do that, we had to find someone who had just moved in with their ex-wife.
So it is difficult. I had hoped that she would spend maybe naively much more time in the cottage, rather than in the house. But if I had to rationally have looked at it before, I should have expected it, I suppose. The way I'm seeing it is that I'm doing this as a parent, I'm not doing this as a person. And that's what guides me. If I was approaching this as an individual, I would have run from this idea.
So a very noble idea. And I also thought, great, this is a great character. He's got a good story. But as is so often the case on our show, and with This Is Africa, and with Lesedi's direction as an editor on this, we decided that the story was not about the man. And it so often isn't about the man, Lesedi. The story in this case was about the ex-wife who decided to move in with him. Rachel chose to do that because, and that's not her real name, in order to raise their daughter, because during South Africa's lockdown measures, all travel was prohibited. So what we found out was interesting about this story is that people make difficult choices. And this was one of her choices.
I could have very easily said, oh, the laws have changed, but living at my ex's house will still be better for my child. So let me carry on staying here for the rest of the duration, even though it's not great for me. In a way, I prioritized myself and I said, okay, the laws have changed. I'm out of here because I knew my mental health needed it. So it's good to be able to see the boundary between self-sacrifice, but also protecting oneself.
So that's how you start with an idea and a topic, and then move to a story. And it's through this process of revising and revising, which can be arduous, painstaking, and often really frustrating if you're the producer who keeps having to dig and find more. As you can see, the second one is obvious. Find a good talker. As you heard, these were great talkers. We pre-interviewed many of them to try to find out what kind of things do they do. identify sounds and scenes that we might want to use in the story. For example, this couple would meet together at only one time of day, which was around the dinner table. So we recorded that. Often you don't want to go to the activist or the spokespeople. They're too rehearsed as talkers and not going to give you those authentic, perhaps more vulnerable answers that you're looking for. And that's how you decide between experts and human stories. They both have a role. You just have to try to find that in your story. The last lesson that I learned, and I'm still learning, and we all keep learning, and I think, Lesedi, you do a brilliant job at this, is that we need to listen and really, really listen during an interview. Don't write down a long list of questions. Don't read out that list of questions to your character. Instead, find out what interests you most about their story, and then listen. Ask them a question. Listen. And then do what Lesedi does brilliantly when she does these interviews, which is follow up. Don't stick to your script. And here's what she did. I think this is a pretty brilliant interview. Lesedi interviews a very famous African actor who's saying some really powerful things about the virtues of acting. And she's kind of waxing lyrical about this. And I'm sort of absorbed by deep thoughts like this. But Lesedi was really listening with a critical ear. And here's what happened.
I can't then look to the West for beauty, for wisdom, for anything else, because I know it exists on this continent. And even in real life now, as with work, people always get surprised that I only do work that I'm guided to do. I don't do anything else. I'd rather not work than do things that I'm not guided to do by the ancestors and God. That's it. So I don't mind. Like, I'm one of those exes that can stay at home for 6 months and not even be bothered.
What does that mean economically? I'm just wondering that. Does that mean, like, I mean, when you're broke and you're not getting parts and you're not feeling called, or how do you navigate that?
And that's Lesedi there doing a really great interview. I don't want to steal the thunder from you, Lesedi, so I'm going to hand you over so you can tell us a bit more about that.
Awesome. Thanks, Dhashen. You always have the best stories about all your recording ventures. But yeah, thank you for that. So that is an excerpt actually from our pilot episode for This Is Africa. And I just want to say our pilot episode is done. I mean, that is a big deal for us. So whoop, 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 whoop. I feel like there should be some sound effect, but there isn't. And before I talk too much about it, maybe let's just play another part of the pilot just to share a little bit more with everyone about what it sounds like.
So when did this happen for you? It's always been there. The moment both my grandfathers closed their eyes, I knew I was guided. God and the ancestors, they will never let you walk alone or hungry. Welcome to This Is Africa. I'm your host, Lesedi Mogoatlhe, coming to you from Joburg, South Africa. This Is Africa is a new podcast. Think of it like a massive gathering of fabulous people from across this beautiful continent. And you're going to hear stories about extraordinary moments and ordinary moments that we experience living here. There'll be a lot of laughter on this show, probably some tears, people sharing what's in their hearts and what's on their minds. To make this podcast, I've been working for months with a team committed to elevating African stories. We're making a lot of effort to create a high-quality production that reflects how proud we are of the creativity that is everywhere in this place we call home. And who better to kick off this conversation than Xolile Shabalala. Xolile is a well-known South African actress who appeared in many of our homes every single day as the character of Julia Modene, a top-notch businesswoman on the popular soap opera called Generations.
Yeah, woohoo! I know we keep, playing these little teasers, but we'll soon be ready to share with the greater public our pilot episode, which we've actually titled "I Write What I Like." And in this particular pilot, I did a two-way with Xolile Shabalala, as Dhashen mentioned, and then Dhashen did a narrative piece, and then produced a narrative piece, and then Andile produced a piece that was slightly different. I really like or admire how Jerusalem was put together. I found it very creative, and I just loved all the different things that Andile managed to do on that piece. And maybe we can play a little bit from the Jerusalem story that Andile produced.
Group that is largely There is one group that is largely credited with launching the dance challenge. They're called Phenomenals Dosemba, a dance crew from Luanda, Angola. We reached the group's founder, Adelson Miser, and he told me how their famous dance challenge video came about. They made it on a day that was bittersweet. It was the 5th birthday of his dance group, and they wanted to celebrate. But
we haven't nothing, you understand? We haven't nothing to eat, nothing to drink. We was, oh my God, today is our birthday, but we don't have money to get some drinks, to get some food.
But the group pulled together. They got some money, bought a little food, soft drinks. Adelson tells us that's the Angolan way.
We was together eating, and we started listening Jerusalem.
And they started dancing and filming. The crew took a classic line dance they'd learned in South Africa and mixed it with an Angolan style that Adelson calls family dance. And the video went viral. The dancers have plates of food in hand. The men are bare-chested. A woman holds a cooking pot on her head. They're a cool group of friends, and you just want to be invited to their party. Adelson says they wanted to show that you can make the most out of nothing.
That is why we was dancing, to show in the people that we don't need too much money or too much things to be happy.
Adelson's videos inspired people to produce dance videos all over the world.
Awesome.
Yes. We promised that this is our final teaser for the day. I think what really was interesting for me was how a dance group from Angola took a South African house song and a classic dance to start a dance challenge that traveled the way Jerusalem dance challenge did. I mean, they said earlier, you talked about how we had to work closely with Freddie and Emmy, in our attempt to produce high quality, humane and fun stories. So what we tried to do with Jerusalem, we wanted to capture the journey the song and the dance challenge has traveled. So we went on our own virtual journey across the continent to, one, find out how people are engaging with the song and the dance challenge, and two, hear really, reflective, personal reflections about the popularity of both the song and the dance challenge. I guess essentially we pretty much wanted to tell a story that highlights and celebrates the African experience and representation in the popular media, which is what This Is Africa tries to do, essentially. So what we did, we sat down with 5 people from across the continent. And I think my biggest highlight was how excited they were about participating and sharing their reflections about both the song and the dance, I guess. So I guess for me, that excitement was a window, to a global community that found solitude from a song and a dance challenge, during a time of despair. With the Jerusalem story, because of many moving pieces that came with producing the story, I think following Dhashen's tips that he spoke about earlier about pitching a story and not a topic, and finding a good talker and listening to them were really helpful. Yeah, this piece was different because, like Lesedi says, unlike the two-way that is conversational or your typical narrative piece, we had to interview 5 different people and figure out where, their individual stories fit into the bigger story we are trying to tell about this story. And at the same time, also have the narrator, which is Lesedi, move us or transport us from one character to the other. So it was quite experimental, as there was a lot of piecing that were moving, and we had a lot to consider. For example, questions for each character had to be specific to their experience and their geographical location. Otherwise they would have all sounded the same and, said the same thing. So how a South African engaged with the song is different to how, the Angolan dance group that Elderson from the snippet that we just played earlier engaged. So another thing that we had to consider was the sound quality, as we were working with different recording environments. So I guess being thorough in how we prepared the interview was quite crucial. Yeah, I guess I'm really excited for everyone to hear the rest of the episode. Over to you, Lesedi.
Cool. Thanks, Andile. Yes, I love Jerusalem. It's such a great part of the pilot. And just there is a pilot, I promise. There really is one. And at the moment where we are in our process with getting it out there to everyone, we're really sending it out to certain people for some trusted feedback, because podcasting is new in Africa, and we also want to make sure that we're asking the right questions, hitting the right notes. And so it's been important for us to sort of put it out there and get people to comment and kind of, pivot and apply all the feedback where it's necessary. We're still learning, of course, and that's the same with our marketing. So many marketing tools exist online, but they don't always apply to the African context. So we've also had to think about, okay, how do we then market a podcast in Africa, and how do we distribute it? And we've had all kinds of conversations, even just exploring whether our podcast needs to exist in the radio space, and leverage our sort of radio networks. But essentially what we're doing is planning a launch, and we will definitely invite everybody to that launch, and would love to hear from everybody about what you think of our episodes, our first This is Africa episode. And just before we open up the Q&A, just to remind everyone, please put your questions or comments in there, and we'll respond to them in a bit. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the radio workshop community. Collaboration is important to us, and even though we're a small team, we really rely and lean into, the expertise of our peers and so on. And so we are looking for stories. We haven't put a call out for pitches, but we definitely want people to contact us, to get in touch, to feel like they're part of our community and bring us stories. And we'll definitely be paying for the stories, so everyone can just get on the website or sign up for our mailing list or find us on Facebook. Just get in touch basically to receive updates on when we'll be putting out our pilot episode, and of course just for pitching or any burning stories that you feel need to be on our platform, just get in touch with us. And then maybe Dhashen, would it be okay maybe to just, if we go straight to the training right now? or should we?
Yes,
can we go
I
ahead with?
think so. Let's save some time for questions. So please send us your questions. Yeah, let's tell everyone about the training. I think that's an exciting one.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, another big thing that we've got up our sleeves is the African podcasting training that we're launching for the first time this year in 2021. Andile, maybe you can let everybody know how that works, how they can get involved, and so on.
Sure. So we're trying our very first 10-week African podcast workshop where we will be training people, everyone that's living somewhere and anywhere in Africa. So there's no experience or audio background that is required. We realize that some of the best, podcasters come from visual backgrounds. So we encourage everyone between the ages of 18 to 35 to apply. I mean, there's also other qualifying requirements that you will learn about in the application. I just want to add that the workshop is free. We are already, in the process of receiving applications, and the deadline for the applications is March 7, 2021. And, the online training will take place between April and June 2021 also. So if you want to produce good quality and story-driven podcasts one day, this is for you. And, just to add that each training will work on story throughout the program, because, we figured the best way to learn is to kind of jump in. So if your story ends up being featured in This is Africa, you get paid. So the biggest component of this workshop is that you will get a one-on-one with editors and producers from the team. I mean, also, if you're not ready to apply now, you can sign up for our mailing list so that you are kept in the loop. We are also planning to do webinars and with experienced podcasters around the world. So information about future projects will be shared with you via the newsletter on time as well. So, a group of people who, quite honestly are tired of hearing the cliches and stereotypical stories about Africans and Africa, and just want to put together a community of people who have the same sentiments and want to tell, meaningful stories. I know everyone, you might have questions about the workshop, but because I don't want to chow the Q&A time, I'll ask that if you have any questions about the workshop, please email us at radioworkshop.com, and please see email on the chat inbox. Looking forward to hearing from you all. Thanks, Lesedi. Over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Andile. Yeah, this is so exciting. We really, really can't wait to kick this off. We've already got applications coming in, and yeah, we want to ask everyone who's listening to also just share this information with people who you think might really be suited for this training or who might benefit from this. So I think that's about it from us at this point. We've got a few questions. It would be great maybe to just have our board, the Radio Workshop, .fm. Yes, that's it. So that's our information right there for our Facebook and Insta, Twitter. So just jump on the website and you can get basically a summary of everything that we've just presented today. But for questions, we've got a question about, is there any kind of time frame regarding the public launch of the pilot episode? Yes, so we've been going back and forth, but we are looking at having an official launch mid-April. It's far, but it's also very soon. So everyone look out for that. Do we have any other questions?
Doesn't look like we do, but we do have, people who are looking forward to this and, really a fan of our podcast. So that's exciting.
Fan of our teasers for the podcast.
Exactly.
Any other questions? Yeah, I think we've still got about 8 minutes to go. Just invite anyone who's listening to ask any questions around the radio workshop, about the This is Africa podcast, or anything that we spoke about today, or just generally what's going on.
Lesedi, I see there's another question there, and if we do have more time, I can always talk about the collaboration that we've done as well. So
City, right? Yeah.
So I see a question here. What can you say about the current penetration of podcasts in South Africa's online population? I guess all of us can answer this. I mean, it's really hard to say anything about it, really, right? Because statistics are rare in this. There's few people doing, reliable statistics on podcast listening. Iona.fm, I think, does some in South Africa. I honestly don't remember what the last statistic was. I think it was something random, like 3 or 5 million people listen to podcasts. But yeah, it's really hard to give you an accurate answer there, Sam. Lesedi, Andile?
No, I think that's your question, Dhashen.
Also mentioned Josephine, of course. Africa Podfest is researching podcasting in Africa, so we will have more reliable statistics like these coming out. I think what Africa Podfest is doing is actually really great. They're seeing these gaps that we have. Like, how do we make podcasts without knowing what people want to hear and when they listen? I mean, one of the crucial reasons for why podcasts ended up at the listening time was 20 or 25 minutes was not based on our attention rates or when people stop getting interested. The reason it was 25 minutes was because that was the average commute time for a New Yorker. So this idea that podcasts must be 25 minutes comes from somewhere else. So what Africa Podfest and others are doing to do this research on the ground is really going to, inform how we produce our stories. Do we go for the 25-minute, or do we realize African traffic is a 10-minute or 50-minute commute? These are questions I think we're at the very early phase of trying to answer. So Sam, it's a much bigger question. We don't really have a good answer.
Thank you, Dhashen. I'm just wondering if we have to wrap up soon, and maybe can do our thank yous and goodbyes for now. I guess there's a whole day of programming ahead. Okay. Here's someone's asking about the African Podcast Workshop that's coming up. What kind of information can we share? Maybe some dates? I don't know. Andile, is there anything else that you want to share about that? Maybe about eligibility and what we're looking for and that sort of thing?
So if you go to social media platforms, you get all the information there. But to essentially emphasize that the closing dates for the application is on the 7th of March. So if you're interested, we encourage you to go ahead and apply. But again, you're eligible if you between the ages of 18 and 35. And you're based in the continent, you have experience or skills in storytelling, perhaps you're a videographer, reporter, an activist, a writer, and so forth. You want to tell stories about issues impacting you and your community. And like I said earlier, you're really tired of the cliches and you really want to tell stories that impact your community. And you're really interested in hearing high quality podcasts and stories that humanize the African experience. I think if I miss anything, if you follow us on our platforms, on social media platforms, you have the information. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Andile. There's someone who's actually asking, Dhashen, I think it's from the point that you made about the length of the podcast. Someone is asking if you can produce a podcast story which is less than 25 minutes.
Sure. I mean, the ways that we've been working have been, producing stories that are 10 minutes, 12 minutes, 15 minutes. A podcast can be any length. I just want to remind people, if you want more information about the podcast workshop, go to the link radioworkshop.fm. It's on our training page, and you'll see all the information there. Probably the number one question, and I have to say this before we end, is as a almost 40-year-old, if you're not within the 35-year age limit, you can still apply, but priority is going to be given to those between 18 and 35. It's probably the number one question I get asked whenever I post about the podcast trading is, how do you have to be under 35? And you don't.
Yeah, me too. I get that a lot.
It's us oldies. We just want some representation here, Otherwise, you ages.
Would be part of the mix as well. Come on. Yeah, but maybe we can all just say our goodbyes. Thank you so much for everyone's time, for everybody who came to listen to us. We really want to keep conversing, chatting, get in touch, learning more about everything that you're doing. And just a big shout out, a big high five to everyone who is out there, kind of, I don't know, what do you call it? On the grind and making it happen for African podcasts. We know all the challenges and we're kind of in this together, and hopefully we can keep pushing and really grow this industry so that we can be equal players in the global podcast industry. Andile and Dhashen, I don't know if you have any last words.
I think that was perfect from my side. Thank you so much for everyone who listened. It was a real pleasure to be here. So thank you to the Africa team as well.
I think, Lesedi summed it up so well. Thanks for everyone for engaging us. And we're really excited to hear what everyone else is working on, and looking forward to collaborating with you in the future. Don't forget to follow us. Thank you.
Thanks everyone. Bye.